It's taken me a while to find the time to write this up, and a long time for the trauma to settle so that this period in my life could be looked at from a more objective viewpoint. I've never really revealed anything this personal to the general public before, but after keeping it secret for years, I think it's about time this becomes known. Before anyone gets so invested in this post, I should note that I did not actually see that much of the Dogman. Now this is in quotes because I'm still not 100% sure if that's what I saw, but I still find it the most plausible. This is more about the experience and how it and the creature has affected my life. So here it is. This experience took place when I was 10 years old. At the time, I only had my mother taking care of me, no father around. We lived in with my great-grandmother in Pennsylvania for the majority of my childhood. My mum had made friends with a woman who owned a large lakefront property near Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. She made an offer to let us live in her small cabin on the property she owned in exchange for work at her art shop. We ended up flying over in approximately 2007. One thing that helps me remember the year is that the next year after we came back, Obama was elected president. Now this property was located in a relatively isolated area. There were other inhabitants in the general area, but from the main road, you would have to turn onto this gravel road that led into the heavily wooded area, drive for a minute or two, and then you would be on the property. On this property was a small, deep pond, a shed, the woman's house, which was decent, not to upscale, but better than our cabin, and behind the house was a cliff that overlooked a shoreline of Lake Michigan. Once you get into the property, you're surrounded by woods. In hindsight, it sounds like I'm describing a horror movie setting. So when we first arrived there, I believe it was mid or late summer, possibly early fall. One weird detail was the presence of this large, red, dead fish that was always just laying on the ground. I found it in between the small, deep pond and the shed. It was so out of place. It was a big fish and couldn't have come from that little pond. I've tried to Google what types of large red fish live in Lake Michigan, but nothing I found looks like the fish I saw. The closest thing I could compare it to was a red snapper. Now that I look it up, it looks a lot like it. Part of my mind is trying to rationalize this as maybe someone from the woman's household bought it, didn't like it, and threw it out. But why? Anyway, that's just the first of many odd things that occurred. I honestly can't remember too many other normal life details of my time spent there in Wisconsin, since we were only there not even a year. But when winter came, that's when I remember things started to get a little strange. In the snow around the shed, there were these odd, huge footprints. Thing is, I remember them being round. I kind of compare their roundness to that of an elephant's foot. My mother chalked them up to being bear footprints, since that was the only rational explanation we could come up with. But I don't remember them being shaped like a bear's. There were also some other strange snow prints. One of them looked like someone put on a pair of snow skis and walked through the snow a little. Strange thing about them is, after a while, they just stopped. My mother was weirded out about these ones. It was like whatever was walking there flew away, disappeared or something. I've considered that someone around there may have been walking in snow skis, but this was a fairly level, dense forest. My mum said she heard something on the radio about a wallaby escaping from captivity or something. So we just kind of sort of assumed it may have been that. We even made a cute little song about bears and wallabies playing on the range. Now, for the shitty part. Fast forward a couple of months. It was in the middle of winter, and it was absolutely freezing cold outside. We're talking sub-zero temperatures. I think because we were so close to the lake, it was worse. This encounter happened late at night. Our cottage had one floor and a loft where I slept. I can't remember every detail of what exactly happened, but everything seemed normal till I woke up to my mother panicking in the middle of the night. She ordered me to stay up in the loft and not come down. I was so confused and scared because I'd never seen her act like this. She wouldn't tell me what was going on. She had me bring up the ladder so in case something got in, it would have a harder time reaching me. So for about what felt like an hour, I stayed in the loft, watching my mum as she was looking out the window with a knife in one hand and a phone in the other, scared out of my mind until the police arrived. When they got there, she told them she heard banging on the side of the cottage, which didn't make sense to me at all at the time because I didn't hear anything like that. We left the place for the night and found a motel, which was just about to close until we got there. I remember what that room looked like. That was without a doubt the most traumatic night of my life. I thought we were going to die and that something was after us, and I'm pretty sure my mum did too. We had just moved to this cottage in Wisconsin, and we weren't even there for a full year. The incident was so terrifying that my mum immediately booked a flight back to Pennsylvania, where we originally lived. But our flight was delayed. I remember doing what kids do, being impatient and moving around a lot in the airport. While we were sitting in the waiting area, there was this rude family with a girl who was making fun of me, pointing and laughing at me a little bit. We were unfortunately seated next to each other on the flight. For some reason, she started picking off her hair and placing them on my mum. It was an awkward flight with a lot of tension, which made it even worse. I also remember cussing at them on the way out of the airport. This was out of character for me to do, but damn, was I out of it. Since we were, and still are, very poor, we have lived with my great-grandmother for most of my childhood, never truly owning a home or property, so when we left Wisconsin, we had to come back. Things seemed to be normal for a while, and it had been a couple of months after this incident. Then for some unknown reason, my mother began behaving extremely neurotic, which I had no clue why. It really would stress me out when she did this. I can't exactly remember what she was doing, but it was enough to stress a young kid out. One day, she slept for longer than usual, and when she woke up, she thought she had peed blood as her urine was dark in colour. She kept saying she had missing time, like as if she'd experienced an unusual amount of missing time or just something. This insanity went on for about a week or so. Now for my encounter. So on one of those nights, we were in the kitchen. My mum was making something to eat, and I was sitting at the dinner table, staring outside the kitchen window. The house we lived in sat on a large incline that overlooked the town area, and I was looking at the lights from the city. Right outside of the house, near this window, was a large oak tree that was close to our house, with its branches being above the window, about 10 to 30 feet away. It was dark, so you couldn't see anything else but the distant lights. As I was sitting there, staring at the town lights, something red appeared in the corner of my eye. I had thought it was another city light, so my vision slowly wandered over until I was looking directly at it. One singular glowing eye, sort of reptilian in shape from my memory. It's not exactly how Mothman is usually described. I sort of remember a slit pupil like a lizard, just more luminous. I don't remember seeing another red eye, but it may have been obstructed by leaves or branches. I sat there kind of daydreaming a bit, not totally comprehending what I was seeing. Then it blinked. It fucking blinked. I remember backing away from the table saying, "Oh no, please no," and telling my mum there was something outside of the window. She looked and saw it, but didn't immediately panic like I did. Honestly, this might have been worse than the first. No, actually I think it was, because I saw it. We went up into the bedroom and we were just kind of sitting there, clueless on what to do. My mum resorted back to her manic behaviour and basically stayed and prayed over me until I fell asleep. She was still doing it when I woke up. Then we got into my mum's van and we left. Things continued to get more stressful, to the point where I thought I wanted to die. For the next day or two, my mother would drive us around aimlessly in her van. She didn't have any direction or destination. She just drove, crazed out of her mind. We would occasionally stop back at our grandmother's house in the daytime, but we didn't stay there at night. At some point, a mattress was brought into the back of her van for me to sleep on. I think we stayed in a lit parking lot at night when I fell asleep. When I woke up, she was still driving around. I hated and pleaded and begged for her just to let us go back home, even though I was also scared about returning. After much coercion and persuasion, I eventually talked her into going back to our grandma's house so I could sleep in a comfortable bed. I was still just a kid and was really tired of this bullshit. She was so paranoid and panicked that when we came back, she didn't let me eat the food she'd previously made. Even though it was perfectly fine, I was hungry, and to this day, I hate letting any food go to waste. I had a collection of stuffed animals that meant a lot to me. She put them all in a black trash bag. I found them, but she still wouldn't let me have them. I think she burned them because she was burning a bunch of other things. Out of her manic mental state, she started to burn a lot of different things. I hated that she did that. It really hurt me a lot. I loved those things, and she ended up putting multiple cross statues and pictures of Jesus across the house, as well as outside on the porch, on the oak tree. Even put some cross symbols on the doors around the house. And this is actually kind of painful to remember now. Even though it's so far back and removed, it's mentally painful for me. One more odd thing that happened though, while she was burning things, my grandma gave my mum this old Bible-looking book for some reason. This just wasn't any old Bible either. It had a hard leather covering with some sort of carving on the cover. It was in a language that I didn't know, but had the English alphabet characters. It had an old-looking black and white images that looked medieval in style, though I can't remember what they depicted. Probably some disturbing medieval art. My mum burned it. For the longest time, I was confused about what this book was, what it meant to my grandma. Was it truly a cursed and evil item that needed to be destroyed? I spent some time searching for clues. I read that it could be Lutheran. We found a place to stay with one of my mum's friends. We were in her basement and stayed for about a week or two, and then found a shelter for abused women. It did work out though, since we received some help after we found a place in Ohio where we could actually live. This incident became a thing we were able to eventually leave in the past and get over, but occasionally we do bring it up and talk about it. At first, it was hard because she wouldn't talk about it at all, but later on we were able to discuss it, and I got her to tell me what she saw outside our cabin in Wisconsin. She said what she saw were two red eyes about 50 to 100 feet away from our cottage. She showed me how it was moving, whatever it was, not erratically, but keeping its distance. Behind our cottage was this heavily forested area, exactly where this thing was seen. Mum physically showed how it was sort of getting closer to the cottage though, though it was still a considerable distance away. The two red lights never got close, or at least close enough for her to describe any features other than those two red lights. She wouldn't let me come down from the loft to check out why she was panicking and what was happening. She called the police and said that she heard banging on the side of our cottage because she knew that was more believable than if she were to describe what she was seeing. She had a knife the whole time before the cops came. As soon as the car arrived, she said whatever this thing was looked over at the police lights coming through, turned around, and took off running near a dilapidated barn, which was located further back into the forest. At first, she chalked it up to somebody with red goggles staring at us, maybe playing a prank. She was surprisingly skeptical, even considering it possibly being a cryptid. This argument doesn't really hold up because during our first encounter in Wisconsin, it was late at night during winter. It was extremely cold where we lived, and especially since we were right next to a big lake. I don't think anybody would have been out there trying to play a prank like that and try and spy on us through a small window in our cottage. So this is where some strange little discrepancy pops up. Sometime after this first encounter, we again had an encounter with a red glowing-eyed being right outside of our grandma's house, which we had lived in for many years, secure and without paranormal incident. This to me suggests that this may have been the same entity in both encounters. So how did it travel such a distance? Why did it travel across many hundreds of miles just to harass us? It has no logic. Such a feat makes me believe that whatever we encountered was not a physical being, bound by laws of physicality and traversing such distances really would not be a problem for it. There's also the subject of what this really was. For many years, the only explanation that I could come up with is that it was an actual, real demon. Since this incident, it has popped up into my mind occasionally. Sometimes I would just happen to click myself into the paranormal side of YouTube, where they talk about cryptids, supernatural happenings and phenomena. This piqued my curiosity, and I began doing some online research, comparing other people's encounters and descriptions of various kinds to my own. I've since read, heard, and listened to other people's encounters with a being that also has glowing red eyes. This actually appears to be a common phenomenon that comes up in such encounters. There are a few Bigfoot sightings, which some are reported to have red eyes. Both the Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster were described with red glowing eyes. I've read of 1 or 2 alien encounters where they had red eyes, and apparently Dogmen are often reported as having glowing red eyes as well, though not all. This is definitely a supernatural phenomenon, and one that inspires fear. I would go back and forth in my mind, trying to figure out which cryptid this could have been. I didn't see the whole body, thank goodness. If I saw a fucking giant werewolf-looking thing with murder eyes in a tree outside, my soul would have jumped out of my body. I've heard many other people on the Dogman encounters describe them with red eyes, and there was this one episode in particular that reminded me of my own encounter. Only the guy could see the full body. He said it was also in a tree. Then there was the location. I think where I lived was not too far off from Bray Road, where the infamous Beast of Bray Road was reported. That one had red eyes. I honestly don't have anything else to compare to. But if anything would be living out in that forest, walking around in Antarctic winds and deep snow without a problem, it would probably be one of these beasts. I apologise that this was so long, probably includes some unnecessary details. I just really needed to talk about my encounters with this thing that harassed us. It's just that I've never told anybody about this entire ordeal. This chapter of my life, mostly bound by paranoia coming from my mum. It almost feels kind of good to get off my chest, cathartic to get this out. To this day, that shit still sticks with me. Also, sorry if this is unorganised and chaotic. I stayed up for over an hour typing this out. Haven't really proofread it as I'm tired and I just want to go to sleep now. I'm nervous about how this is going to be received. I'll try to answer any questions if I'm able to and clear up anything that might be misunderstood. Please understand that this is my first time really putting myself out here with this information. I know my mum said for me to always keep this whole ordeal a secret, but I couldn't not talk about it any longer. So, in these recent years, my research has led me down a rabbit hole into fringe topics and strange subjects regarding the paranormal and the true nature of reality. After many years of reading, watching, listening and research, I think I may have a theory about what dogmen actually are. But a lot of it has to do with, not sure how I should say this, but understanding what a dogman is requires a greater understanding about the true nature of reality itself. One needs an open mind for this. I say this because initially, I disregard this whole subject area as crazy, schizophrenic bullcrap, ironically unaware of how my own experiences could be labelled the same. Even though these were objective experiences, I admit I don't have the whole picture, far from it, but slowly I'm putting the pieces together. I'm glad I took so long to make this post, as a year or two ago, I did not have the current knowledge or state of mind that I currently have. I may make a separate post in the future about my theory of what I think dogmen actually are, and how they're part of a greater aspect of our reality and existence, which is poorly understood. I hope one day I might be able to understand what dogmen are, and doing so, help others.